Negotiating with Jesus. We're back. It was only seconds ago that I clicked the button to end my recording, but I'm going to go through Mark chapter 4. One of my favorite stories. This story is fascinating. So Jesus, we're looking at Jesus, a life that is just so extraordinary. People still study this life and are amazed by Jesus. We're still as amazed as the people in the book of Mark who listen to him and they're like, what is going on here? Who is this guy? Well, he's the Son of God, and he's remarkable and he's mind-blowing. So we're going to read from Mark chapter 4, verse 35. The heading, Jesus calms the storm. That heading was, of course, not in the Greek text. These were things added so that the contemporary followers of Jesus could understand and be able to find the places in the Bible where they're reading. So you turn to Mark 4, verse 35. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Okay, Jesus, we'll follow you over there. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. I'm going to read that again. And there were also other boats with him. That day, when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was, in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" "Jesus, we're dying, we're drowning here." He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the winds and waves obey him." So there it is. Jesus calms the storm. A very small, simple story. So much packed into it. It's like a little seed. If you'll accept some little thing, this story will grow into something so big, you'll be able to climb its trees, sit under its shade. So, a couple strange things. They took Jesus along just as he was in the boat. He wanted to go over to the other side of the lake. Okay, so they took him just as he was. I don't know what that means exactly. They didn't ask him to put on his fine sailing clothes. You know, like the skipper, he has that nice captain's hat. He is the captain of this group, and yet he did not dress in that, or like Thurston Howell III, there's a reference, you check that out. Dressed up real snappy in his sailing clothes. Oh, he's fancy. He's a fancy man. Jesus, just as he was, gets in the boat. Other boats go along. And then a furious squall, a quick storm comes up. And it is crazy. And it's, the sea, the waves are powerful and they overwhelm us. Waves overwhelm us. The waves are overwhelming the boat. It looks like it's going to sink. So the disciples are freaking out. And Jesus is sleeping. Jesus is sleeping. He's not too concerned. He wants to catch up on some rest. And they run over to him and they shake him and wake him up and say, "Jesus, don't you even care about us? You're just going to let us drown here?" As if he could do something about a storm coming in and swamping the boats. Couldn't you at least panic with us, Jesus? Do you have to act calm when we're all panicking? Can't you be like us? Can't you be like us, just totally unable to handle anything that life throws at us? Overwhelmed, fearful. And Jesus is like, hold on a minute, you guys aren't leading me. You're asking me to do something. You don't even know what you're asking. And this is a common thing with Jesus. We don't even know what we should ask him. But whatever we ask him, it's the dumbest thing we can say. Don't you care if we drown? Well, yes, I do care if you drown. That's kind of a dumb question. Haven't you been watching me? Doesn't it seem like I care? And they're shaking him and saying, Jesus, can't you do something? So Jesus, of course he can do something. He has calming of storms in his back pocket. And he gets up, he rebukes the wind and the waves as if they're a misbehaving child who, under the authority of the teacher, is immediately obedient. There are teachers, you've had them, that if they tell you stop talking, you stop talking. You don't tone it down. There are teachers who you are afraid of that will tell you, or teachers of children that tell them something and the children listen. There are people with some kind of authority. Now, nobody says that to waves, but Jesus talks as if he has complete authority over the wind and the waves. And they listen. They're obedient. And he says to the disciples, why are you afraid? Why do you think I don't care? Why do you think we're going to be overwhelmed and killed? If you've been watching me and listening to me, you ought to start developing your faith. I've planted some seeds. They ought to be sprouting here. What is going on that you guys have no faith? And they were terrified. They're taking those seeds and saying, get that away from me. Jesus, you're too much for me. You're overwhelming. You're more overwhelming to me than the waves and the wind. They were very frightened. They were frightened, and they rebuked Jesus. They were like waves washing over Jesus. They were out of control. They were like, Jesus, we are going to give you a piece of our mind right now. And their fury, or the squall that they bring, is nothing to Jesus. The wild squall that's frightening them is nothing to Jesus. Jesus, more than the storm, washes over them, and it is terrifying. He's way more powerful than the wind and the waves. The wind and the waves are under his power. So they're more terrified afterwards, after Jesus calms the storm. They're more terrified, and rightly so. They're more terrified. They couldn't overwhelm Jesus. The storm couldn't overwhelm Jesus. Jesus, with just a word, overwhelms them. And their whole understanding of the world is shaken, and it's like they were like Jonah. They're thrown into the sea, and they're like floating, and it's like, I hope a big fish eats me here, because this whole thing is unknowable to me. They were terrified, and they asked each other as if any of them had any real understanding. They're not listening to each other, they're listening to Jesus. He's the teacher. When they talk to each other, they're bewildered, they're dumbfounded. They're all each as ignorant as the other. That last part I just got cut off, so I'm just going to close with this. As we each as ignorant as the other try and sort this out, we're really going to end up with the choice, this choice. We're overwhelmed by Jesus, and we can't overwhelm him. He says things that seem like small ideas that we planted and grow, and we'll be left with the choice of either accepting him as he is, simply accepting him as who he says he is, or rejecting him and seemingly rejecting the only thing that has this great power that overwhelms us and yet loves us. So like and subscribe. Negotiating with Jesus. I will talk to you again sometime soon. Thanks. Bye.